Today's guest is the guy when it comes to Minot State broadcasting. Joining me now, it's Neil Roberts. He's taught a ton of kids broadcasting at Minot State. Let's start right there. What made you want to get into this field and in order to teach it?
Ben, getting into the field, I grew up listening to the Minnesota Twins on the radio on a farm in northwestern North Dakota. And so I just started to picture as a 7-year-old and as an 8-year-old. And on the farm, we go, not a whole lot of other things to do this summer. We worked, and so I look forward to that 3 hours that my dad and brother were not playing country music necessarily, and the Twins might be on. And I really started just to be captivated with not just baseball and how it worked and the rules but just how people like Herb Carneal, who was the play-by-play guy for the Twins for a lot of years and one of my favorites, how he could paint a picture and how I could envision the game unfold before my eyes. And as I learned more about the game, and some of that might be lost today a little bit. You know, he was very precise in his descriptions. And so if the Twins brought up remember they had just say a hard throwing, rookie like a Pete Redford back in the day, like a first round pick out of USC that was in the minors for a fairly short time. And he went on and he actually got injured and crippled in an accident unrelated to baseball, which was unfortunate. But when he came up his first game, you want to know not just the ball's fouled off, but if it was a right-hander and it's fouled off to the right, we know what? He's behind the fastball, right? Or if they're pulling it foul, that they've caught up with his fastball or his off-speed pitch or whatever it might be. So a lot of those little nuances with the game and his ability to storytell really intrigued me. And then reading people like, Sid Hartman, who passed away here recently at the age of 100, and did not quit until the day he died, actually, Yeah. So Sid was working till the end, and just watching people like that really do their craft as a kid and realizing that, I think I want to learn more about this area of communication and what goes into it, and finding out all the other jobs associated with that was very intriguing to me.
Yeah, I remember they had that C open at Lambeau Field recently for Sid Hartman and just honoring him there and his whole career, no matter if it was a division rival or whatever. A lot of people seem to know him. And when you were growing up waiting for those Twins broadcasts, did you at least like country music or were you stuck listening to it?
I was stuck listening to it, absolutely. So, yeah, I really grew to resent it. I like it now to that extent. But back then was, an 8-year-old kid that, if the radio went over to KFYR for a while and they're playing rock and roll, I'm thinking, oh, this music's a lot better than stuff you're listening to, Dad, So, yeah. But he loved to listen to the Twins, too. So he had no issue when the pregame show came on to get it over to the Twins. And so, yeah, back then, Ben, it was kind of like the TV saga. For a while there, Minot didn't even have a station that carried it, where the farm's about 70 miles away. So I'm finding scratchy stations in Williston or in Jamestown or back then WCCO was the flagship out of Minneapolis. And if it was a game on the coast, that signal would actually bounce up to this area when it was late enough at night. So just trying to find a radio station that had it. There's no internet back then. There's nothing I could just pop online on my phone and put the app on. There were no cell phones. We're talking back in the, early to mid 70s into the late 70s and so forth. So, but yeah, so anyway, I hope I answered your question. I forgot what your follow-up was there, but yeah, finding the station was half the battle. Do something.
Yeah, I mean, just be glad that we have things like Spotify nowadays and get all your good shows that way, good shows and music, all that good stuff. So you grow up that way. Why do you end up at Minot State doing this? Why is this the spot, Neil?
Well, I didn't know that it was, I guess, when I came here. I came to Minot like you, Ben. I was applied for a job at KMOT TV, was hired there as a anchor, producer, and reporter. they gave me promises that, because like you again too, my first love was sports, and they told me that I'd have the chance to transition to sports when that opportunity would come about.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a year or so later when that opportunity did come. But by then, I was really liking my news gig. I was covering agriculture. I had a lot of good sources for my beats that I was covering. I liked anchoring news. I liked working with the sports guys. I liked producing it all. I was loving all of it. I thought, why mess up a good thing? Plus the Twins, back then, if they would make the playoffs like they did back, I think they won it all in '91. If I was doing sports, I would have been out shooting volleyball or basketball or a football game during, Game 5 of the World Series. That would have been a tough one. So I got used to the schedule and stuff, and really embraced it. So I helped out with sports. I shot sports for them. I anchored sports for them when they needed a backup and stuff like that. But I decided to stay in news. And when this job at Minot State opened up, I just really wanted to. Broadcasters don't make a lot of money, especially right off the bat. I know you're probably the exception to that rule, Ben. I know they put a big contract in front of you, but
oh yeah, sure, yeah.
To scrape her claw a little bit. So I thought when I applied for the gig, I just thought, and I only had my master's degree, and it was a master's required, PhD preferred, and I thought, well, if I could just teach a night class up there, that would be cool. Make a little extra cash. I was a teaching assistant at North Dakota State University. That's where my undergrad and master's degree is from. So during my master's degree, I did what they call a teaching assistantship. And so my assistantship, I taught radio production. I helped out with TV production labs. And really liked it more than I thought I would. Plus, I got my tuition for free then, and they paid me for about 20 hours a week to boot. The 20 hours was for my tuition by and large. The stipend wasn't that much. But anyway, that's where I got my first taste of teaching. So I knew I could do it. And then out of NDSU, there was a sabbatical of a professor down at the University of South Dakota. That when my college professor called me, just on the heels of getting my master's degree, she said, "Hey, University of South Dakota is looking for somebody to fill in for like 1 year. There's a sabbatical on leave. It pays pretty good for a year." And I thought, and back then broadcasting business was really tight and not many openings. I thought, hey, let's do this for a year. I'm just going to, and again, hunting for jobs was different back then too. I mean, it was just a ground game. You had to go places, make phone calls. It wasn't, today where my students can send stuff out on the internet and get in front of hundreds of stations in an afternoon, So it was a different time back then. So you had to actually mail tapes physically, put them in the mailbox, $3.27 of postage, and send them on their way to Dubuque, Iowa, or wherever you're trying to get taped to, So anyway, I went down to the University of South Dakota, and the 1 year turned into 2 years, and I really enjoyed it. I did some radio for like WNAX over in Yankton. I did some other radio stuff with some sports. I met some really neat sports people down there, and I helped them with some play-by-play and doing color analysis. So I was enjoying life, but I knew I wanted to get back into the business, and that's what led me back then. During college, getting that master's degree, by the way, I worked for KXJB TV down in Fargo. And so as far as my professional experience goes, we can talk more about that here in a bit. I know you're going to ask me a couple more questions in that area. But as far as why teaching then Minot State was the right spot, after the interview and after then I accepted the job, and then KMOT at that time wanted to keep me on board to anchor on Saturdays and keep doing this awards-winning series that we were doing called On the Farm. And it was kind of a no-brainer because they still wanted me to report some and do some anchoring for them and some producing. Working election nights, stuff like that was a lot of fun. I still miss that. But it was kind of a no-brainer then for more pay, to go ahead and take this teaching gig and still keep my feet in the broadcasting world. And Minot State was in a really, the department was kind of in a dark time right then. You know, they were wondering if they should keep this thing going or not. And so I was kind of given, they didn't tell me it was like a 2-year window to figure it out. But I said, so I really wanted to, and just based on my experiences, I was involved in a couple of great programs when I was at NDSU and at the University of South Dakota, and was familiar with other programs, other grads. I worked with Tom Gerhardt out at KMOT, and he told me a lot about the UND program back then. So I had a pretty good idea if I ever ran the ship on something, I know what I would do, just from a student's perspective. Like, boy, I wish I could have had this as a student, or I wish I could have done that as a student. Well, they kind of gave me open reins at Minot State, and I really appreciate that they did. And they wanted me to turn that program into something that, you know, would help recruit, would help give our grads some experience in-house so that they're ready for an internship, to really try to turn the corner on that program. And so I took on that challenge. The studio had been dark for like 7 years, and so we got that going again, and we just had help with guys like, you know, Greg Bakke. So Greg was my technician back then, and then John McCann after that, and now, I've had, you know, Chris Brown helped out a few years ago. Now Lee Johnson's up there. So I've really had a wonderful associates, and so I'm a small piece to this puzzle. But I just try to have a vision of what would I want as a student, you know, in a program, and that's how we do things there. And higher ed can be challenging at times. You know, it's going to be bureaucratic and has this or that, and I can't do everything exactly the way I'd want to do it, how quickly I'd want to do it, but that's what I wanted, to really give the West Central North Dakota something. So in stations like KX and MC and KMOT TV and even over in Williston and down in Bismarck, and there wasn't a whole lot of grads in that type of area coming out. And then the world of communication, of course, is a lot more than just TV and radio. And so we started a public relations option at Minot State, PR and advertising. We kept our print journalism going. I restructured the TV radio production one. Since now we've moved SpeechCom underneath that area. We started an option in social media. We're looking at an option perhaps here in the not distant future in sports communication. So we just keep evolving and try to work with, it might not, it just, so yeah, and it's been awesome. I wouldn't trade it for a second. So I've been there for, like 25 plus years now, 26, 27 years. And it's been awesome.
Great, man. So how lucky are these kids in order to, like, if they come to Minot State, there's been a lot of communication between MSU and, you know, KX and KMOT in town here, because I've got out of, like, everybody else at KMOT currently has had to go to school, like, far away and find this job. But, like, this is a school in a starter market, and there's been placement over the years. That's pretty fortunate.
That's very fortunate. And, you know, I tell students, whether they're from Minot, Velva, Bismarck, Orlando, Florida, Chicago, Illinois, Los Angeles, we've had kids from all over the country come to our program. Some are student athletes. Some come here for our program specifically. But I let them know that Minot, North Dakota, geographically, I'll take our apartment aside for a second, but if you get into this world of TV, radio, public relations, advertising, there's no better spot in the country, I believe, than to be in Minot, North Dakota. And I think, Ben, you've seen that bear out, right? You know, how many times have you called me and said, hey, we need or Joe from your station has called and said, hey, we need a photographer, or we need a reporter, or we need some help in sports, or we need some this, that, or another thing. And so we have a great relationship with you guys over the years, great relationship with KX over the years, when, especially, you know, with, like the likes of Jim Olson, and working with people like that over the years was a lot of fun. And we don't always, there's so many opportunities here. Then you throw in advertising agencies in Minot, plus they have Jay Davis, a couple of radio stations, iHeart with 6, that's 8, K-Heart with a couple, that's 10, Jay actually is the one up in Botno as well, too, so 10, 11 plus radio stations in town, a daily newspaper, public relations and advertising agencies. So you name the game, and there's internship opportunities here galore. And that's one thing I wanted to change at Minot State. I know when we got interns back when I started at Minot State, or started at KMOT from MSU, they weren't really ready to hit the ground yet. And it wasn't their fault. They just weren't able to get reps, and it wasn't the person necessarily in charge in time their fault either. It was just a matter of a lot of circumstances. But the students weren't quite where I thought they would be as an intern sometimes. And sometimes they would get traction, but sometimes they wouldn't. So my main concern then when I took over there is I want to make sure that our students always made a positive first impression at an internship site. They knew how to write. They might know how to shoot. They might know how to edit. They might know how to put together a press kit if they're on the PR side, whatever the case might be. So that's been part of that evolution as well.
What about just the way that broadcasting has changed over the years since you started? And you were saying, like, over the years you also, like, seen the department expand. Do you feel like that's kind of like your biggest responsibility leading this, is just, like, keeping up with the time so that kids are prepared?
Well, it really is, not to date myself, but I had an internship back in the mid-1980s with a guy that you've probably never heard of, but if there's older listeners to your podcast, they've heard of Jim Adelson. So Jim Adelson and Russ Smith were a couple of the iconic sports broadcasting folks back in that day. And I was doing an NFL pick'em type deal for the Spectrum, which is the campus newspaper for NDSU. And each week I thought I would bring in a guest picker that had some, notoriety, right? So I had the NDSU football coach on week. I might have the university president on one week to pick against me. I called like the Ed Schultzes, the Dan Hammers, and the Jim Adelsons of the world. And, a couple of those guys, they're all nice to me, but they all typically did them over the phone. And I called Jim Adelson. He actually had a sports show that went statewide back then. I was just expecting the worst. Like, is this guy even going to give me 2 minutes? But he was one of the most gracious people I've ever met in my life. And so he said, well, why do you want to do them over the phone? Have you ever seen our station before? Would you want to come to our station? Why don't you come on out? We'll do the picks out here. Like, that'd be awesome. And I'm a farm kid. I'm a sophomore at NDSU. So I go out there and we meet, and he gives me a tour of the station. And we were yucking it up a little bit for a half hour before we even did our picks. And at the end of it, he said, hey, Neil, I want you to intern for me. I'm thinking, well, that'd be cool. Like my junior, senior year, I'm thinking. And he said, no, I want you to start Monday. I said, I don't know if I can start Monday. What kind of role for the class? And I said, I haven't had all the prereqs yet that I'd want to do an internship like this. He said, nope, you'll learn all that here. And he called a guy named Charlie Johnson, which a lot of you might know of, in the room. And they assured me that I could start an internship there soon, and they would just keep my hours for a while and convert those and whoever needed to do and just come out there and start getting after it. And I'm like, absolutely yes, So that really helped me out as far as getting out of the chute, because there's no way I would have got that just with an application. Because we had kids from UND, NDSU, Concordia, Morehead State that were juniors and seniors and ready for an internship like that, where I was just getting some traction. But Jim, one of the first things he impressed upon me was this thing called videotape. You've heard of videotape, right, Ben?
Yeah.
So he was so impressed with this new technology back in the mid-'80s, because he was used to working with film. Now, Neil, our cameras are lighter. Cameras were like 40 pounds back then, probably. Plus, he had a deck then that had videotape. Deck was another 30 pounds. You're carrying around like 60 pounds of weight with of equipment. Then the tripods were really heavy to have to, be able to support something like that. So you had a lot of heavy gear back then. But then that was still portable, then the beta Sony cams came out, which got rid of the deck and made it on the camera, and it just started to evolve. And so then the evolution is then we go to digital, right? HD and digital tape, and then now we're shooting off little cards. My students don't even want to use any sort of format other than a little, video card they can put in the camera and pull out. So that's where we're at now with technology. And you're right, staying on top of that is a challenge. And Lee Johnson up there has helped me. All my associates on the tech side have always been great assets for us up there. But we now have a full HD TV studio up there. We have a TriCaster, a TC1 TriCaster, which is state-of-the-art. We have several studio cameras that are HD. We're fully digital on the audio side as well. We use Adobe products. So we've transitioned well. I'm glad we waited on our transition. So I remember back going to conferences here a decade ago, and schools like North Carolina presenting things, they got their $2.1 million to go HD, And I'm thinking, how the heck are we ever going to do that in Minot State, So, but we got a great relationship with Mid-Continent, and we run the local access channel for them. And we're still on an analog channel there, actually, so the conversion happens in there somewhere, but it still comes out analog in the end. So our feet were not put to the fire as far as having to get HD content to go on there. So that helped. So now we're actually ahead of where we're at on that channel. And in the end, it's the students that really make it happen. Whenever you have these transitions in technology, they're really leading the way. You get them started a little bit, and they're on it, and they grew up with a lot of this technology. And so they're a lot quicker to transition than I am when a new platform comes out, or a new piece, or Adobe comes out, or you name it. So yeah, it's great to have a great group of students and people that surround you to help those technological changes happen. Because as you know, Ben, now they're coming quicker. Back in the day it was from this to that, and it took a few years. But now every year something is different that you can do out in the field. And I'm sure at KMOT you guys are trying to keep up with that as well.
Yeah, it's been good to get new stuff. Even 5 years I've been here anyway. So you had a bunch of names in the front end of that answer, and I was going to ask you anyway, who's been like your broadcasting and teaching influences, either folks that you've spoken to or you've just listened to announcers and you kind of model things after them, Yeah,
well, I mentioned Bert Parneal earlier, so he's a big one in radio. I remember when Bob Costas has always been a big one from the national scene, and I remember I was down working for a campus radio station. It was actually a public radio station as well, down in Fargo, KDSU. And I was doing a Bison football report, some little longer form stuff that went on public broadcasting, which wasn't necessarily their format as far as sports, but they let me go with that. They turned me loose a little bit. And they have a Roger Maris golf tournament down in Fargo, as many are aware of. Of course, Roger Maris, a North Dakotan baseball player, in my view, still holds the home run record because he did it without any sort of assistance along the way. They had an asterisk on his name because they went from 156 games to 162, but he had 60 home runs back in '61, and then succumbed to cancer on his later years in life. But they have a tournament down there, a golf tournament each year, and they bring in all these high-profile people. And it's a fundraiser to fight cancer. So I thought I'd go out there and do all these interviews if I could, and piece them together into a mini show of some sort and a tribute to the tournament and stuff. And my first guy I answered was an ex-Minnesota Twin, a guy by the name of Bob Allison. And a lot of those guys like Bob, they were there. Bob Allison, he was there to, he wanted to go there and represent a little bit, to play some golf and do their thing. And a lot of these guys weren't interested necessarily in doing media interviews necessarily. Some were and some weren't. So I got my first no of the day. I'm sure you know what that's like, going up someone trying to grab them quick, and you get I got to get over. It's a shotgun start. I got to get over on hole number 9 here. I said, all right, no problem. Mm-hmm. Thanks anyway.
Yep.
Out comes Bob Costas. And I thought, well, I'm guessing he's got to tee off somewhere else too, So I introduced myself, Bob. Hey, I'm Neil Roberts. I'm doing this piece for KDSU. I'm a student at NDSU, and I was wondering if I could get a minute to just ask a couple of questions about Roger Maris and the tournament. And he's like, absolutely. Took off his golf gloves, shook my hand. Neil, tell me more about yourself. Before we got rolling, you want to know about me. The same guy that said no to me happened to be teeing off and then comes over. We're about 2 questions in and yells to Costas, hey, Bob, hop on. We're teeing off on number 13 or number 9 or whatever it was, their shotgun start. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget that Bob turned to him and he's probably about 20 feet away or something. And he's trying to yell over the motor of the cart and stuff. And he said, hey, guys, go on without me. I'm interviewing with Neil right now, and I'm gonna give him all the time he needs. So I'll find you. Don't worry about it. And I remember just getting goosebumps as a college kid back then when Bob Costas told these people to just he was gonna take all the time he needed with me. And so yeah, that was kind of a life changer for me to realize that you're gonna hit all walks of life when you're interviewing people.
He must have had a really good scramble team where they didn't need his shot for a while.
Yeah, exactly. If I was in a big loss, no knock on Bob Costas' golf game, but so that was kind of cool. So he's always been at the top of my list as well. But then, Jim Adelson, interning with him back in the day, he was a big influence, and he handled crowds so well. Now there's a lot of people out there. Charlie Johnson was the news director out there at the time. So Charlie was influential. My first Saturday producing was with a guy named Ted Quade. Ted was one of the best writers I've come across in broadcast journalism. And Charlie had just asked me, he just hired me. I came in I was going to start on a Saturday. And he wanted to know if I could start already in 2 days. I said, I've got company coming up for a Bison football game this weekend, so I don't know if it's going to work. I mean, I could get out there by after the game. I could be there by 4:30. Normally the producer comes in around 3. He said, "Yeah, come in at 4:30 that day. That's cool." So I come in at 4:30 that day. Ted didn't know that, so Ted thought I showed up an hour and a half late, and just reamed me out. Mm-hmm. and said, "What are you doing? This I don't think's working around here." Blah 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 blah. I tried to explain myself. Well, I had permission from Charlie. I realized that 3 is the normal starting time, and that he gave me permission to come a little bit late. Unfortunately, I guess you guys didn't discuss that. And so I don't know how to edit. Yeah, I do know how to edit. So he had me edit. Then later on, he apologized to me and said, "Hey, great job on the 6 for me, and good job putting together the 10, and you're going to be a great fit," and blah blah blah. So yeah, Ted and I got things worked out. But Ted was, I really appreciated that day though too. Looking back, that just to know that in his book, no excuse was good enough. But that being said, let's get stuff done. I interned with a guy named Steve Carlson on Dakota Sports Network. Steve Carlson, I still remember he said, "Hey Neil, there's a Minnesota Twin coming to town tonight, and it's my anniversary. I'm taking my wife out for dinner. Could you cover for me? Could you go interview this?" He was a rookie last year, but this twin named Kirby Puckett. And I'm like, "Yeah, I could do that." I was already a huge Kirby fan, and Kirby came up in May, I think, of his rookie year, and so he had most of the season in. No one knew he'd go on to be the baseball player that he was back then, but that was cool, and that's thanks to Steve Carlson. Then over in sports side there, Dennis Silva was a great mentor to really show me how to produce things accurately, how to put a cast together. All those Friday night, when you guys do that Friday night football under the lights stuff, Mm-hmm. Is that what your guys is called, under the lights? You guys football frenzy, or what do you guys call yours?
We're under the lights. KX is football
under the lights.
Yep.
I won't mention the other one then. Yeah. So that's a lot of work, right? You've got people all over. So I still remember at 6:30 when that cast was done, that we took 20 minutes. We just wrote leads for all. We're anticipating 16 tapes one night, I remember. And they're coming in from Fargo, coming in from all over the place, right? Plus we're getting 12 of our own. And so just writing leads to all those stories before we left, which I know you do too, I'm sure. And they got to be quick leads too, Mm-hmm. The undefeated Bishop Ryan Lions take on Deal, be at home tonight. Let's go to wherever, right? And so it's a quick lead because you got all these highlights. You got 6 minutes maybe to get them through. They give you an extra couple minutes. So that was fun to do with Dennis. And on weekends it would be different. He'd show me, I really learned the different nuances of a cast and how to story tell with him. And Tom Point was another one. Tom was sports director back then out there after Jim Adelson had left. And and Ray Schobinger and Dave Benton, a couple of news directors I worked with at Minot, were really great to work with as well. So I've been lucky to have all these great bosses over the years that have been not just mentors and not just influential, but just good human beings. And to me, that's how you gain the most respect, I guess. That's kind of where it starts. And so yeah, I've been fortunate that way, Ben.
From what I've seen in your class sizes, you have an opportunity to really communicate openly and have an impact, have plenty of time with these kids at Minot State. So you have a great opportunity to get a bunch of points across. But if you had a short list of some of the most important lessons that you want to get through to your students, what would those be?
Well, for starters, write well, speak well. That always goes a long way when you're doing anything in life. Letting them know early on when I recruit that, hey, you're going to like Mondays as much as Fridays because you're going to love this job. You're going to love this career. And so I share that with them. I try to share my passion for it. I let them know that responsibility is big in the world of broadcasting. And no matter what you do, but particularly broadcasting, double check your sources. Try to get 2 sources per story if the subject matter is of that nature. And if it doesn't sound right, check it out. Don't run it just because someone said it. That we're not fake news, and that's going to be on you, my students, going out there and doing a good job day in, day out, telling the truth, challenging newsmakers, and yet being respectful, and then just learning the craft. It all starts with your portfolio. This 4-year degree is going to be awesome and a necessity, but the first thing they're going to look at is your videotape. And when you put on the video, you've probably got 15 seconds before they decide if you're going to be in the looking against stack or the not looking against stack. So when you're sending your stuff out, put your best stuff first, and relationship build, network with guys like Ben Barr out at KMOT, and if you get a chance to rub elbows with guys like you, Ben, I encourage them to do it. I've had you in the class, several times. By the way, my final question on the midterm was, I've had like 5-6 guest speakers in this semester already, and I said, pick one of the guest speakers and tell me your biggest takeaway. And your name came up quite often, Ben, so good job. People.
Oh, wow. I was going to ask you, how helpful was I?
Yeah, you were very helpful, Ben. Yeah, if you want me to jump into that one, I know my class appreciates your life stories. And yeah, so you've been immensely impactful. And I personally know you're really and the students appreciate how your approach to your job, how you go about your business, and how hard you work. A lot of people have no idea. By and large, you're one person running a sports operation in Minot, North Dakota, and you've got to cover it all. High schools, colleges, all that stuff's your bread and butter. Plus keep up with regional stuff like the Twins, Vikings, Wild, T-Wolves, and other stuff nationally on top of that. So I know your plate is full, and yeah, you've always made time for our students in our department. I really appreciate that. And you guys have been great with our students to work with out there too, so I appreciate that as well.
I always thought they had good questions, and I know that I'm not naive. When I was in college and I had my laptop, I was definitely doing other stuff a ton of the time when people were talking. So I thought they were honed in good enough, and it wouldn't have hurt my feelings if they were doing something else the whole time I was talking.
They were leaning on your every word, Ben.
Yeah, I'm sure. So another big part of the broadcasting department I wanted to ask you about, because you chip in a lot of this, whether it's getting it started and going versus just ramping up the grand total at the end of the night. KMSU Auction. What were the best prizes of all time, in your opinion, that have come through for that? Because I always love watching that. It's coming up here.
One year we gave out, a couple of years we gave out a car.
Oh, yeah?
That was always my dream, to try to get a car. So we got a used car from a dealership in town, and they were great to work with. And it worked great that first year, and a local person bought the vehicle. It was a used Toyota truck, and they guaranteed it for like a week. We had to have them guarantee it for at least a week stretch, which was they really didn't want to do. But just so we didn't get in the pickle where they got something and there were no brakes in it or something, So, and then the next year, someone else bought it and they resold it on another lot. So that got into a tricky deal. They weren't happy about that, and so we've had stuff like that come up. But it's been awesome. It's really been awesome. It's a great fundraiser for us. But the most important thing is all the things it teaches our students. So for those not familiar, we basically turn our TV studios into QVC, or the Home Shopping Network, for a night, and we take a whole semester getting ready for it. And it's a local opportunity for businesses or people to get their word out on their business, and we can actually give a QVC style approach to it all. And I got the idea. The QVC came through North Dakota back, I think it was in 1998 or something like that, and they were doing 50 states in 50 days. And a lot of Pride of Dakota businesses were out there vying for like the 8 spots or whatever there were going to be. And the ones that got accepted into QVC and to get their 15 minutes or 20-minute window, they were popping champagne bottles, and everybody else looked like their dog had just gotten run over, So I put a little thing in my head, I wonder if we could do that on our Channel 19 local access channel. And back then, the likes of, Nick Trier and Rob Hall and Ryan Gellner and Jamie Judd Bruner and, gosh, I know I'm missing a ton of them, Brent Sompe, Nicole DeRozier, that just had a great group back then that they were selling donuts and coffee out in the hall for 25 cents. It was our fundraiser back then. We did $1,400, I think, for their first one, and they were just ecstatic. And they set the bar high from the get-go. So I owe that group a great deal. And Sean Sitma, our mayor, can't forget him. He was in on that group as well. So I don't know if the great things that we've given out over the years, I guess the great things we've given out is this opportunity for students to learn something a little different, but it's in everybody's wheelhouse. There's jobs for everybody in an event like that. So
that is just a murderer's row of KMSU Auction broadcasters you just rattled off. And nowadays, all the kids, they can only hope to hold a candle by having their pre-show meeting at Spicy Pie. And it really shows their effort throughout the semester, and also over the course of that dinner, perhaps, the way they conduct themselves on the air.
Yeah, you bet. So, and again, our success in our department is all about our students and our grads. And Krista Fogelsong down in Fort Myers, Florida was one of my first one. Brian Belanger was in my very first class. He's the chief videographer now out in Spokane at the ABC affiliate. So, we've had a lot of students come through the program over the years, and they've really represented us well.
All right. So to your point about the used car, you had to make a couple of checks. Make sure that everything was all good, nothing needed to be fixed without wrecking and all that stuff. Speaking of fixing, and I'll let you roll on this one, how do you fix the Vikings?
That's a tougher one, I'll tell you. It all starts with the offensive lines and defensive lines, and I had high hopes again this year, as I do every year with the Vikings. So I've watched their 4 Super Bowl losses back when I was a kid, and been waiting to get back there ever since. But I've never been a Kirk Cousins basher. I mean,
never a fan.
Aaron Rodgers wasn't available to us, right? The Mannings weren't available to us. And okay, who can we get? Are we really want to go with Sam Bradford? Case Keenum had a nice year, and the offense, he worked around the offense pretty well, but he can't really throw the 20-yard out or the deep seam, so we got to take that out of it. And he tries once in a while. I mean, that throw to Diggs for the Minneapolis Miracle was awesome, and that's probably his best throw of his life. But again, it was just it was a blessing, because if that would have zipped right out there, if that was Kirk Cousins throwing that ball, it would have been to Diggs a lot quicker, and that just all the stars aligned on that one. If Diggs catches that 1 second faster, the safety just tackles him, right? Mm-hmm. Don't place on the ball. But it threw it just perfect where he just got beyond the corner, and the safety came in and collided and was just missed it. Because, and it just, anyway. So sometimes it's just dumb luck,
Was beating the Packers this season worth the opportunity of losing out on Justin Fields in the draft?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Because Trey Lance is right there, obviously.
Yep. Yeah, Trey Lance, yeah. Well, let's get him anyway. What the heck, Although I didn't know much about Justin Fields, I knew about the Clemson kid. I've watched him numerous times. Mm-hmm. I thought, look at their run on Ohio State quarterbacks, and they're not that good. A lot of them got in the first round,
in the pros, yeah.
The guy in Washington right now, and the guy, and you're a Redskins fan, I know, right? So
I'm an Eagle guy, but I mean,
you're an Eagles guy. That's right, you're an Eagles guy.
I know too much about Justin Fields because before he was at Georgia, he decommitted from Penn State. So I mean,
oh wow, okay,
not too much of a favorite, no.
I did not know that.
Yeah,
and he's at Ohio State now, right? Right.
Yep.
So, so I watched him here 2 weeks ago, and he's the real deal. It looks like he can make a lot of the throws. He's got good feet. It's hard to judge these quarterbacks at big programs sometimes, like at Alabama or something, because they're, and even at NDSU, they be not, because they get a lot of time to throw. The receivers are usually wide open. It's just like it's not quite the guy who is at North Carolina State that has no offensive line. He's got like 3 seconds to throw, and but anyway, so yeah, Phillip Rivers had a little different route, but yeah, fixing the Vikings, as it starts with the lines. They had a good draft pick in Justin Jefferson. Thielen's great. Hate to see Diggs go, but he kind of forced that upon the organization as well. So you just got to let some of these things play out. But yeah, the fix can be the O-line and the D-line ultimately. And now they're going to have some salary cap issues with some of the big contracts they have. They just signed Dalvin Cook to a big one.
He looked worth it.
I was a little split on that one, but we all see what Dalvin Cook can be, like last week, right? That he's more than a difference maker. He's one of the best backs in the league, without a doubt. But we also know the history on running backs as they get 4 or 5 years in and get close to 30, especially with a guy that's never really had a healthy season to begin with. But sometimes their hands forced a little bit. And with the Cousins extension, I mean, at back then they're assuming they're going to get in the playoffs. So what quarterback's going to be there with pick number 24 or 27 or 30 or hopefully 32 if you win it all, So I think it's hard to blame the coaches or the GM on certain things like that. As far as making a few other decisions on where to put some chips, maybe we could. But anyway, so fixing the Vikings would start with those lines, and I mean a quarterback that can run might help a little bit because he can get out of some trouble, but we've seen Carson Wentz really get banged up in the league already, and when he runs, he gets punished. And so, yeah, that's not – Lamar Jackson's been, I think, just out of this world and doesn't take many hits, actually, Knows when to slide, knows when to get out of bounds.
Would you rather –
hard to get a square hit on, but yeah, the Vikings, I think they need more than a quarterback for all the Cousins haters out there.
So would you rather have a quarterback that stays in the pocket and turns the ball over like Kirk Cousins, or a quarterback that's more mobile and turns the ball over like Carson Wentz?
Well, Carson Wentz, without a doubt, yeah.
Okay, good. So,
but Carson Wentz went number 2 overall, and I don't think we had the number 2 overall or one overall pick here. So some of those things just haven't really been available. There's been a lot of great running quarterbacks in college that have a good arm that have totally flopped. So, remember Jamarcus Russell out of LSU, weighed 270 and ran a good 40 time, and so the Andre Ware and the list goes, Heisman Trophy winners. So the list goes on to a lot of guys that have seemingly all the tools, but it's a tough transition, and they're not all Pat Mahomes. And even Pat Mahomes in college, though, they didn't. they weren't killing it either, and they thought he was going to be a little too erratic on teams that did pass on him. But he was erratic a lot of nights because he had to throw so quick because he didn't have, back at Texas Tech, he didn't have all day to throw, and the offense wasn't quite set up, and he didn't have Andy Reid running the show. So anyway, yeah, the quarterback's a tough one, but I'd say the O-line and D-line, that's where I'd start as far as fixing stuff.
Thankfully, you don't have to worry about getting an offensive line in fantasy football. So what's been your strategy there as you look to win the Kent McKay League?
Well, the fantasy leagues to me, it's kind of a two-part process, right? You've got the draft, and to get ready for the draft a little bit, and hopefully have a decent draft. Then you got to be somewhat active on the waiver wire too, and or make a trade or something. So I think the years I've been successful with it, I've been able to draft okay and pick up some guys along the way to help me out. And the more years that I lose track of it and don't pick a guy up in time and someone else gets him on me, or I don't have a real good draft night. So it's like anything else in life, right? The better you prepare for your 6 o'clock gas tonight, Ben, the better it'll go probably. And if you don't, it doesn't go maybe quite as well sometimes. So a lot of it's just preparation and being active with it and having fun with it. So being in there with guys like you and Nick Dreyer and the whole crew that Nick's got, Greg Cheddar. It's a fun team. It's a fun group to have a fantasy league with. And that's the main reason I do it and enjoy it. And then, if you win a little something along the way too, that's cool. And we get some bragging rights with these guys.
That's right, because that's the only thing at stake, just bragging rights and nothing else. Who wins a championship?
That's right.
Who wins a championship first, the Vikings or Purple Pride, managed by Neil Roberts in the Kent McKay League?
Well, I would say Purple Pride because not that I'm smarter than Rick Spielman, but I don't have the obstacles of Rick Spielman. I don't have to negotiate contracts. If they're available, I can just go get them. You can't do that necessarily, or make them available, or offer a trade for Mahomes today and get it done. So I've got a little more versatility and flexibility, and I get a fresh shot each year with a slate clean. He's kind of stuck with an ongoing roster, so like in a dynasty league or something. So I would hope it'd be Purple Pride, but I would not be upset if it was the Vikings either.
Yeah, and at this point of taping here, the Vikings are getting ready to play, I believe, the Lions, who might even give them a run for their money, even though Matt Stafford keeps getting the Rona. But, I think you're in a better position at this point. That's for sure.
I think so. This year for sure. Yeah, the Vikings aren't going to take home any hardware. And I've got a glimmer of a shot in our league yet, I think.
Yeah, you'll be a recurring guest on the show when the Vikings are finally good again. I'll have you back on. But, you'll have plenty more experiences between now and then, I'm sure.
All right. That sounds good, Ben.
All right. That's Neil Roberts out of Minot State Broadcasting. Neil, really appreciate your insights and your time, man. Thanks.
Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.